Welcome back to Face the Nation. Our guests this evening are Dr. Parkeswar Saramuthu, the Executive Director of the Centre for Policy Alternatives, and also Professor Vijay Singh, parliamentarian and leader of the Liberal Party. Dr. Saramuthu, you said something very interesting. You said that a new constitution should be introduced and this constitution should address the grievances of the general public. The time starts now. 3 minutes for your closing remarks.
Well, as the discussion has gone on, I think viewers will realize that the whole question of constitutional reform is a fairly complex one. There's a lot to be done. There are challenges and pitfalls along the way, but nevertheless it's absolutely essential. So far in this phase of the constitutional reform project in this country, what we haven't really addressed is the roots of conflict. We are still in a post-war situation rather than in a post-conflict situation. And I define that in terms of saying that the roots of conflict have not been addressed. They must not allow to be sustained and certainly should not be reproduced. And you need, therefore, a constitutional framework that accommodates the aspirations of all the peoples in this country as well as meets their grievances. Now, I have advocated for a very long time that there should be a federal constitution for Sri Lanka. Federalism is a controversial word. It's dismissed out of court. There are all sorts of problems with regard to it. However, what I actually mean by that is that you have a system of power sharing, which is your central concept with regard to governance, whereby you can bridge the democratic deficit by allowing people greater responsibility for the decisions that affect their lives. Secondly, you then have a grievance mechanism in a way of resolving the ethnic conflict, and as a consequence of doing that, you release the energies and potential for greater economic prosperity. Now, this requires, I think, every community, every group in this country being engaged in a national conversation and dialogue with regard to constitutional reform. I don't think it should be exclusively done by parliamentarians or lawyers. This is something that every citizen in this country must get involved in. And my last point with regard to this is that in 2015, in that presidential election, I think there's an argument for saying, since these issues with regard to the ethnic conflict were kept out of it, that the political parties treated the electorate as citizens. Now is the point to recognize that treating them as citizens must also accommodate the multiple identities that each one of us has at the heart of the governance of this country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saramuthu. Professor Vijay Singh, your time starts now. 3 minutes.
Very interestingly, I think if Sarah's mind goes back to the days of the Liberal Party's discussion on this, we had a lot of debate about whether the unit should be the province or the district. And although we finally agreed on the province, we also thought the reason for the district was the principle of subsidiarity, which is giving people power over their own lives as much as possible. I have felt increasingly that while we should not affect the province, the real answer lies in empowering local communities, taking the principle of subsidiarity further. You have to remember that in 1987, when the 13th Amendment was passed, there wasn't that much stress on local government in India, which was a model. There was not even so much in Britain. That tier of government was not empowered the way it should be. And I found that when I proposed this during the talks with the TNA was responsive. Mr. Sambandhan said, we can't ignore what Gandhi wanted. Other people in the TNA said, no, you mustn't take over the province. We said, no, not at all. So I think we should move towards greater empowerment of the local government unit. And certainly in my work in the last 2 years, I did a lot of work in divisional secretariats. We worked with the UN on a project on improving service delivery. And for the vast majority of people, it is things like education, health, which really are much better handled at that level. Because in all fairness to whether it's Jaffna or Trincomalee or Galle, they don't know the real problems of the peasantry. How do you monitor schools? And I was very sad that as this government was elected, the project with the UN had been suspended. And I told Karu, let's work on this. And he was very excited. But then he said to me, sadly, I don't have divisional secretariats. So I think what we need is empowerment of the people. That's what democracy should be about, and that's best done through subsidiarity. My second area of great concern for any new constitution is a Bill of Rights. that was promised in the Mahinda Chintanaya. When I became Secretary of the Ministry of Human Rights, I found nothing was being done. There was a committee. Jampatha Wickramanayake headed it, but he wasn't very keen on working because he thought, but I persuaded him to have meetings. They produced a very good draft. And I told Jampatha in November, put that in the manifesto. In fact, he has only put the right to information in, and he told me that he's not the time. Maybe he felt like Mahinda Rajapaksa did, because I tried to persuade Mahinda Rajapaksa to put it. And he said, no, there are things that I don't like. So I said, what? He said, they want to legalize homosexuality. I said, well, that's not, I was a bit weak. I said, if you like, leave that out. But essentially, the rest of it is things like the right to life. We need to strengthen it, to strengthen things like the right to education, the rights for the disabled. But that Bill of Rights is a good draft, and I have put it to Parliament as a private member's bill, and I hope that it will be at least discussed, because incorporating it in the Constitution is, I think, a vital part of empowering the people, just as subsidiarity, divisional secretariats, giving them much more control of their own life. Those should be our principles.
Professor Vijay Singh, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Dr. Parkeswar Saravamuthu, thank you very much again for joining us this evening despite your demanding schedules. Thank you very much, Nadeem. Faraz, Sonali, for joining us this evening as well. Will the 19th Amendment to the Constitution be a success story? Will it benefit the general public? Only time will tell. As days, months and years progress, the answers to these questions will come through. Thank you very much for joining us on Face the Nation tonight. Next week at 7:30 right here at Stein Studios, we will meet you once again with 2 more guests. Thank you very much again for joining us this evening.